Please welcome to the stage moderator Alan Casey, Kara Eskay, Julie Gerke, and Fagan Harris for our next conversation.
Good afternoon. This has been such an extraordinary day already. I would say that we've saved the best for last, but that wouldn't be truthful because every single panel, every single person has spoken so beautifully and inspiringly. And given all that is going on in our world right now, from Maine to the Middle East and across our country, my heart is overflowing. You all have given us such hope. So I want to thank everybody for that. And I want to thank Stephanie Street and the incredible team here at the Clinton Library that's put this together. I'm so excited to be here moderating this panel on AmeriCorps as a community asset with such tremendous leaders and dear friends of mine. Fagan Harris, who is the co-founder and former CEO of Baltimore Corps and now serves as Governor Moore's chief of staff, doing a fantastic job in Maryland. Julie Gerke, who is the Vice President for Philanthropy at Walmart and has funded so much of the great efforts that are going on in our country, across our country, and has really been leading on volunteer service. And Kara Eskay, who does a fantastic job leading the America's Service Commissions, the National Association for all 52 governor-appointed service commissions and territories in our country. These are such great leaders, and we're going to have a fantastic panel. But I got to tell, I really feel like this is a family reunion, and being back here at the library is bringing back so many fond memories. I hope you'll just indulge me for a minute to share some stories from the beginning. I also have to give a shout out. I'm here also as co-chair of More Perfect and as co-founder of City Year, along with my partner and best friend Michael Brown, who's sitting here over here. Also a tremendous service leader. I have to give a shout out to the incredible City Year Corps members and staff that are here with us today also. 30 years, amazing. So I still remember November 1992, the day after Thanksgiving, when I was riveted watching CNN and I saw President-elect Clinton stopping after he was jogging to the assembled press corps, and he said, I'm going to commit to developing a new national service program as one of the top 4 priorities of our country. I called Michael, and I said, you watching this? And he said, yes, let's get off the phone so we can hear what he says. And true to his promise, that legislation happened in 9 months, record time. You think about what's going on in Congress today, amazing that got done. And a big reason it got done is because President Clinton tapped really the perfect person, the ideal person, Eli Segal, who brought his entrepreneurial spirit, his understanding of politics, his ability to reach across the aisle. It was a bipartisan support for that bill. And I know Eli's smiling down on this celebration, and we all miss him so dearly. I still use the wisdom Eli taught me every day, and I'm so glad Phyllis is here, who is a leader in the service movement in her own right through her work with Cogenerate. So it's great for Phyllis to be here. And it's great, I just want to echo what Mark said. Michael, you're doing such a fantastic job following in Eli's and Harris's and Wendy's footsteps. The vision you laid out this morning was so powerful, and all of us in the service movement are really lucky to have your leadership at this time of great challenge and opportunity. So thank you, Michael. I also remember like it was yesterday, the very first event at the White House on national service in March of 1993, hosted by then First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton for Public Allies, the organization that my wife Vanessa Kirsch started. I still remember what Hillary said because she was so powerful. She said, AmeriCorps represents the best of our core, C-O-R-E values, community for all, responsibility from all, and educational opportunity to make the American dream possible for everyone. And this movement has given me so many blessings, including so many in this room. But at the top of that list, I have to say, is my wonderful wife, Vanessa, who's extraordinary, who wishes she could have been here today as well. After meeting Vanessa, I quickly realized it was better to marry the competition than try to beat it. And I can tell you, for the young people here and even the older ones, if you're looking for love, stay involved in the service movement. You will find it. I'm proof of that. So, one of my favorite quotes from President Clinton is from his inaugural address, when he said, "There is nothing wrong with America that can't be cured by what is right with America." And AmeriCorps has been embodying the fundamental wisdom of that truth for 30 years. And it's extraordinary. Now, I'm here as more perfect, and we're also focused on what is right with America. We are focused on 5 big democracy goals to renew our democracy: civics, service, bridge building, trusted elections, and trusted information. And I want to thank leaders in this room. Together, we've worked with 10 leading service organizations to develop a plan called Ask and All, a plan to dramatically expand national service and volunteering. That title is inspired by Harris Wofford, another person who's watching from above, as he challenged us several years ago at another summit that we need to ask everyone to serve. We have to make opportunities available for all. And I want to thank Amora Connolly for her leadership in crafting this plan, and Kyra Escate, who's on the stage, and Kristen Bennett, who's here, and Mary Ankel Sprinkle, and Elizabeth Schwan Rosenwald, and the other leaders who put that plan together. As we look to the next 30 years, the goal of that plan is to fulfill a vision that President Clinton talked about today: have service starting in schools. A year of national service is a common expectation opportunity for everyone. Service continuing, as Points of Light does so well, for people to serve through the workplace, and then an encore or co-generational period of service. So it just becomes part of the thread of being an American. And a big part of that plan is recognizing that AmeriCorps is an extraordinary community asset. So I now want to turn to this esteemed panel and start with you, Fagan, with the first question. You've been a longtime champion for national service. You worked on the Franklin Project. You co-founded and led as CEO of Baltimore Corps with your governor, Wes Moore, and now serve as his chief of staff. Can you tell us what inspired you to start Baltimore Corps and the unique role it fills in the community? And can you also tell us about the resources service organizations bring to communities across Maryland?
Good afternoon. Good to be with you all. Honored to be here. Honored to be with all of you. It was the late, great Harris Wofford that inspired the founding of Baltimore Corps. When Wes and I were at a summit just like this more than a decade ago, Harris had called out the need and the opportunity to take service to scale in a place. He said, that's really what's been missing, is that we haven't scaled at a place. We haven't seen the power of service demonstrated in a community, where community really takes ownership of that. And so I'll never forget it. Wes, we're sitting next to each other. He looked at me and goes, "How about Baltimore Corps?" Because we're both Baltimore guys. And I said, "I think that makes a ton of sense." And we ended up launching that almost 11 years ago. And when I reflect back on it, I think there's a lot of turns in the road. The most important was during COVID. Baltimore City is, I'm biased, the greatest city in America, I think, hands down. It's easy. And we've got our fair share of challenges. And we're typically accustomed to being, when you look at charts and graphs about the city, on the tougher end of the scale, whether that's in public safety or educational outcomes. Baltimore City was one of the best performers during COVID. Most people don't know that. We performed in the very top percentile of cities of similarly sized, similar wealth of any place in America. And the big reason is we had a service core infrastructure. When we needed contact tracers, we needed people to deliver vaccines, we need people to do care coordination, take care of their neighbors, to kind of get the word out about the public health response. We were able to enlist from the community to deliver all of that value to community. Hundreds and hundreds of people who raised their hand and signed up for that. And that was so powerful and so important, and I think really spoke to the importance of national and community service and the importance of place-based models in particular. And I think this movement we're seeing now at the state level, led by Governor Moore, to kind of take ownership of that. I think AmeriCorps has been the North Star for so long, and it'll continue to be. But I think as we look ahead to the next 30 years, it's about reaching deeper and forming kind of deeper connections around service and really helping communities take full ownership of it.
Thank you, Fagan. Those excellent insights. Julie, your team at Walmart leads the company's philanthropic investments, and you've made investing in local communities a priority. How does national service fit into this strategy, and what about AmeriCorps wants to make you to support it, and why is service so important to communities? I mean, you're everywhere.
Sure. I just want to echo Thank you for having me. It's been an amazing day to be here. I'll start with just quickly about philanthropy at Walmart, because I think that's part of the answer, which is we don't think about it as kind of this segmented piece of the work, but rather deeply integrated with the business and our policy, thinking about how we bring levers together to change systems. And so that means we only work in places where there's deep relevance to the business and assets we can bring beyond the dollars we invest. One of Walmart's favorite facts that some of you may have heard is 90% of Americans live within 10 miles of a Walmart. That means the kind of resiliency Megan just talked about is really important to the company, because communities thrive, the company thrives. It's intertwined. And what we see is, just today, we have a store and a distribution center in Lewiston. We have Kearney, Kansas is without water today, a small rural town. Our store's right outside. And we have 40 stores in the path of Otis who were affected by the hurricane in Mexico. So that means our stores are activating as part of what hits communities. They are as a part of the front lines. And AmeriCorps is often in the parking lots helping people. All of these things, when you're part of the local fabric, that community resiliency becomes really important. And so we've invested in a number of nonprofits who use AmeriCorps volunteers as the backbone, whether it's Food Corps, who's part of our work on hunger relief and nutrition security, or SBC, who does SBP, St. Bernard Project, who's helping local governments prepare for disaster resiliency. We see this as a huge part of the strategy of many of our partners, and really making sure that they can supplement the AmeriCorps stipend to recruit from their local community and keep local leaders there, that they can leverage this to have the staff they need to reach their impact. It has a huge impact, and we see it as a core partner in really achieving this resilience.
It's fantastic. Kyra, through your work leading America's Service Commissions, you've seen how AmeriCorps programs are essential assets to communities. Can you talk about some of your favorite stories from different states about how AmeriCorps programs have risen up to address the needs of communities in both the short and long term? And how have you seen AmeriCorps be a game-changing resource for communities?
Great, thanks for that question, Alan. And again, as everyone has said, it's such a privilege to be here today, to be able to talk about AmeriCorps and certainly the impact it's having in communities across the country. So as Alan mentioned, I'm with America's Service Commission, so we are the national association for those 52 state and territorial service commissions across the country. And that's important because 75% of AmeriCorps funding in a given year typically goes through state service commissions, and we know that more than 90% of programs typically are going through state service commissions as well. So that's a really important part of the story here. And so when I think about kind of some of the most impactful programs, Alan, I think that we all associate AmeriCorps with education programming, and that's certainly a big part of the portfolio that we see at state service commissions for sure. So I think we've heard about City Year and Teach for America, and those are national programs that have had a major emphasis and certainly have been successful. But I think also too, we see state programs that have been doing a lot in their education system. So one is certainly that many of you may be familiar with is Math and Reading Corps. So this is a program that was actually started in Minnesota with state funding from Minnesota, and is an evidence-based model that now has been replicated in 15 states across the nation. And so I think that shows that certainly state innovation, state learning can then lead to programming being kind of across the country. In addition, I know that we've talked about this today already a little bit, but certainly I think that we've seen programs step up in the pandemic and really help with COVID response. So certainly the Washington Service Corps that was funded by the Schultz Family Foundation that was mentioned earlier has been an important part of that, but we also saw commissions and local programs popping up across the country. So those were focused on vaccine outreach, contact tracing, and other things that really made an impact that I think were really, really important during that and continue to be part of that as well. Another area that certainly has been a long-standing funding priority for the AmeriCorps agency and state commissions as well is around environmental programming. And so I think that we've seen that be a big part of commission portfolios, but we we also know now, with increased emphasis on climate programming, the President's recent announcement about the American Climate Corps, we know that commissions and programs are continuing to lean into that space and really want to help expand that kind of programming as well. And we now have 10 commissions across the country that have propped up a climate corps or are about to prop up a climate corps, which I think is a really exciting development, and I think we'll be able to really leverage that with the President's efforts as well. And then finally, I'll just mention a program that I think is really important given a lot of what's happening in the country right now, and that's actually the Refugee Rise program in Iowa that Adam here represents. And that's an important program because I think that we see refugees arriving in communities across the country, and AmeriCorps can play an important role in helping refugees navigate their new communities, really understanding the community resources that are out there, and really thinking about how they can connect them to learning American traditions and also to their larger community that they're now a part of. And so I think that that's a program that probably is not as well known, but I think is a really, really important one for us as we think about how can we help those that are joining our country.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kyra. You're just providing such great leadership across the country. Julie, we've heard from so many wonderful people associated with the Clinton School of Public Service here today. You're a graduate of the Clinton School for Public Service.
A very early one.
Another example of the tremendous impact of that school. During your time there, you worked with many people who served in AmeriCorps. You've also worked with many during your time at Walmart. Based on your experience, what unique values do AmeriCorps alumni bring? What makes them such an asset, whether it's in the workplace, in nonprofits, in communities?
So I was actually reflecting, it's weird to be back in this room. I graduated in this room about 15 years ago. So I was an early graduate. But I think what I saw both at the Clinton School, and I mean, I hire against this today, the community resilience work I talked about, I have a team that does this, and 4 out of 6 of them are AmeriCorps grads. And so what I see, and I don't know that I purposely did that or knew about that until I started kind of preparing for this, is a real practicality. Funders rightfully get a hard time about not understanding power dynamics, not really being thoughtful about all the hard work that it takes to make change in a community. And when you're looking for a team, you want people who deeply value their partners, know that this work is not done in a laboratory. What's written in the proposal is going to change over time, and are partners in problem solving, and do that not from a kind of removed place, but from a place of experience. So I'll give an example. One of the woman who leads the community resilience team is a woman named Eileen Hyde, who left her community in rural Vermont for college, found herself needing to be back to support family, and did an AmeriCorps year. She was part of what is now Hunger Free Vermont. And what she did is she fundamentally did collective impact before collective impact had a name. And we called it that. She organized city and community leaders to say, how will we solve this rising food insecurity problem? How do we get our state offices to be better at SNAP and WIC enrollment? All of these pieces that she brings to her job today and is able to think about it at a systems level. But the experience she has means that's not an esoteric exercise for her. She knows the hard work that's going on in those offices. She knows that this is not somebody who is super excited about the regulation that they're following and thinks it's human-centered design. And so there's a real empathy and understanding that I see in AmeriCorps alums that make them better at not just the job they do with me, but I think combining practical lived experience of how to solve problems at a community scale into system design work to really change this for all communities. And I think that's a common attribute that most employers want. This pragmatism, ability to solve problems, ability to connect dots, that I believe national service and these types of experiences really prepare you for in a way that classrooms, as much as I love them, need supplementing.
I love that, Julie. Shirley said earlier, what's really special about AmeriCorps is that it's a leadership development program that you don't have to be a leader. anybody can raise their hand, and then you develop those. And what you're saying is people not only learn leadership skills, but they also learn a special kind of like system design, systems change. They understand how to bring people together. So and we've heard that from other, the number of AmeriCorps alumni that have spoken today. Fagan, Governor Moore, with your support as Chief of Staff, has made service a centerpiece of his administration. I'll tell you, when he was elected, his first step as governor was to create the new Cabinet Secretary for Service and Civic Participation.
Sounds familiar.
Give in-state tuition to people who serve, create Maryland Corps bipartisan legislation. All of us in the service movement, and I think Secretary King said it the best, service will save us. I mean, he's emerged as such a profound leader with your support and championship. Can you talk about why this is so central to Governor Moore's vision as governor for the state of Maryland, and how has AmeriCorps informed your strategy in developing this program? And how do we make AmeriCorps an even richer, you hinted at this, a richer value proposition for younger people? And how do we keep AmeriCorps as a community asset?
Great question, three-part question.
Yes.
So I think number one, when then candidate Moore was running, he ran on a mantra of leave no one behind. For too many years, we'd seen too many people in our state, my home state, fall behind. Our education in our schools had gotten worse. The public health had degraded. We had labor force participation issues. You kind of go down all the metrics. And Marylanders were suffering, and our state had not done enough to bring everyone along and to make sure everyone's lives were improving. And a corollary to leave no one behind was this notion that service would save us. And he was very, very kind of dialed into that early, because when he studied the situation that we saw in Maryland, a few things jumped out. Number one, our state government had seen 10,000 people walk through the door and not be replaced. So we had a workforce crisis in our public service. Number two, when we looked across classrooms across the state following COVID, we had thousands of teacher vacancies. We did not have enough caring adults in the classroom taking care of our kids. Number three, it's a great time to be a nurse. Like, the signing bonuses in healthcare were through the roof because the shortages were deeply profound. I could go on, but the point is clear. We had a real human capital issue, and we need more people to raise their hand and say, I want to do public service. And the governor realized we didn't just need a solve for that in the short term, we needed a long-term strategy. And that if the state really hugged community and national service the same way we had done that at the federal level, we could build the pipeline for our teachers, for our civil servants, for our healthcare workers, and that could be a game changer for us. In parallel, obviously, he named me as his chief of staff. I think the most relevant kind of experience I'm bringing to this panel today is also have the honor to serve as a board member in AmeriCorps. And so with my fellow board members and with our CEO, Michael Smith, they were undertaking just heroic work to modernize the agency. So, we all know and love AmeriCorps, and it has survived on a shoestring forever, right? Like, databases need to be upgraded, policies need to be rewritten, workflows need to be better thought through, on and on and on. To get ready for the next 30 years, AmeriCorps needed to get ready for the next 30 years. And so I had the privilege of sitting in that space with board members and with Michael Smith, and I saw how they were thinking about the future of AmeriCorps. We need to go to $15. We need to go to $15. We need to see more equity in the service and see representation lifted up as a hallmark of that. We needed to see it really easy for community groups to plug into AmeriCorps and leverage those dollars. These were all first principles of what I call like the reformation or the modernization of AmeriCorps that is underway, that gives me so much confidence for the future of this movement. I cannot tell you how good of a job Michael Smith and the board has done. I mean it, they've done an amazing job. And so what we tried to do was take those learnings and bring it to the creation of the state agency. Mm-hmm. Let's not build it based on the AmeriCorps that was created 30 years ago. Let's model it after the AmeriCorps that's being rebirthed and reimagined today. How do we make sure that this agency, from the very beginning, can stand on its own 2 feet and really create huge value for Marylanders? And so how do we make sure that, as answer the third question, that it's a strategic asset going forward? I think that's the word, is that it needs to be strategic. I think when we think of AmeriCorps, it can't just be tutoring. That's important, but it can't only be that. We have other challenges. We have challenges in climate. We have challenges in public health. We have challenges in infrastructure. We have challenges across the board. And when we deploy it as a strategic resource, there's a return on investment that is more broadly felt. When it becomes maybe just a one vertical play. That's important for that ecosystem, but a lot of people miss out and don't really understand the power of service. And so we're really thinking intentionally about deploying the Maryland Service Corps in partnership with AmeriCorps to make sure that we're sending our young people out to go work on the biggest challenges confronting our state, whatever they are, because that's where we need our people, and that example is really going to shine through.
I got to say, Fagan, I love your passion and your vision and your experience, because you built an incredible program, and now to be working so hand in glove with Governor Moore, who co-founded Baltimore Core with you, and the strategy you laid out, I think it's going to inspire the whole country. But building on that, Kyra, you know, I've been involved in this movement for a long time, and I feel like we're in a new era with governors. I mean, I think part of the brilliance of AmeriCorps, because President Clinton had served as a governor, and he knew that governors knew what was going on in their states, was to make sure that every state had a state service commission appointed by the governors. But now there are governors who are personally championing this, Governor Moore, but also Governor Newsom. We heard from Governor Cox earlier today, and you're working with a number of governors. Can you tell us, from your perspective, why is the governor's role so important? What are other examples of innovation happening in states? And the great thing about the states in our federal system is Maryland can be an example, California, Utah, Iowa, Maine, you mentioned. All together, they can create a fabric of a new service movement. Can you talk about that? And also, why is AmeriCorps as a resource valued by both Democrats and Republicans as governors and at the state level?
Yeah, and thanks for that question, Alan. And I wanted to say, I love Secretary King's comment during the last panel about, let's get a race between the governors. I mean, that's music to my ears, right? I think we want to see that. We're trying to see that. I think that we're starting to see that happen, but I think that there's more that certainly can be done. And I think that one of the really important things about governors' involvement over the years with this movement has been that it has been bipartisan. And I think that so individuals from both sides of the aisle recognize that service really can have an impact in communities and really can make a difference and really help lift up young people and those that serve in general. And so I think that's important. And also, too, I would say that we had many governor's offices on volunteerism prior to the creation of AmeriCorps, right? So some of our state service commissions actually kind of existed prior to the National and Community Service Trust Act signing 30 years ago. And so again, I think that there's been this long understanding about governors that service can make a difference and really can have an impact. So I think that, when we think about state service commissions and the partnership with their governors, again, governors have certain issues that they're focused on, and the partnership between the governor and commissions really can focus the national service resources on those priorities for the governor. So whether that be education, whether that be the environment, whether that be job readiness, et cetera, there's opportunity to really think about a service strategy related to those governors' priorities. And that's why I really think governors care about this, and I think we're seeing more and more governors, again, wanting to lead in this space. Certainly the great stuff that's happening in Maryland has been incredible, and I think a great inspiration for a number of governors across the country. Governor Newsom in California also came into office with a service plan and a desire to really center his work in the service space. And that included, when he came into office, getting state funding to increase the living allowance for AmeriCorps members serving the state of California. Also increasing the education award for members that serve full-time as well. So those were initial investments by Governor Newsom that were really, really important. But in addition to that, there is now new state programming that's happening as well that I think is really going to lead the way for other states as well. So we have the California College Corps that is located on 40 campuses around the state, that really focuses on access for individuals to serve and to actually earn money for tuition as well beyond the education award. We also see the California Youth Job Corps, which is focused on individuals 18 to 30 with lived experience and really encouraging them to think about a pathway in public service, but also too giving them the supports that they need in order to be successful with that, which is very exciting as well. And we see that program is in more than 30 municipalities across California. And then also we have the California Climate Action Corps as well, which is one of those 10 states that have propped up their own climate corps, which I think is really, really important. So again, this idea of priorities around food insecurity, which is a priority in California, which a lot of those programs are focused on, also climate programming as well. Again, matching the governor's priorities with programming and giving people service experiences around that. As you mentioned, we saw the video from Governor Cox earlier, and Governor Cox has been a strong proponent of service back even when he was lieutenant governor of the state. When he was actually running for governor, some of you may know this, he went and did a service project in every county of Utah as a way to really demonstrate his commitment to service as well, and then he's brought that into his office. So last week there were 2 executive orders that the governor signed around service. So one is about encouraging state employees to volunteer, which that is a policy that we see in many states, that state employees do have volunteer time. But then also the other executive order was really focused on this idea around economic development. So if you are a business coming into Utah and want to focus on economic development resources coming from the state, service is going to be part of the requirement to actually access those funds as well, which I think is a really interesting twist on this that is really, really important. So those are some of the current things that are happening around the country. Again, bipartisan, Democratic governors, Republican governors as well. And we've seen that over the years. And I will just say as well that I think another piece that's been really, really important with governors is disaster response. So we've seen as disasters happen in our communities across the country that governors are like, oh my goodness, this AmeriCorps resource is amazing. These people are here, they're serving. I think, one of the primary examples that I think of goes back to Governor Barber in Mississippi after Katrina, and AmeriCorps resources coming in to help Mississippi and staying behind, as people said earlier today, after the cameras were gone. That was really, really essential. And I know Governor Barber became a big proponent of AmeriCorps as a result of that experience. So again, this idea of the bipartisan piece, and I think really helps governors meet their goals.
Yeah, I love this idea of a race to compete among governors, and also how bipartisan it really is, because governors actually see the impact of AmeriCorps every day in their states. Now, unfortunately, we're back to a fight in Congress. There are some people in Congress who want to eliminate it entirely. I wish that we could just, they've been having these all-conference meetings. I wish we could have had every member of Congress sitting here all day, because I think that would help change their minds. And sometimes, to really see the value of something, you have to think about what life would be like without it, as some people in Congress want to do. After 30 years still, they want to do this. So as we talk about AmeriCorps' value, why is it something that communities really cannot survive without? Because now after 30 years, I think as Mark said earlier, it really is embedded. We know it works. And if AmeriCorps disappeared, God forbid, but we're not going to let that happen. But if it did, how big would the hole be in the tapestry of our country now and in our communities? What would its effect be nationally? Why don't we start with you, Julie?
I think it's a really hard thing to imagine. And I think something where we wouldn't be able to predict the impact, because I'm not sure we always recognize the benefits and know all of what we're getting from the AmeriCorps model. In this, one of the things we work on is called caring and connected communities. So fundamentally, that's a grant portfolio that's about building meaningful relationships across lines of difference. And we called it a lot of things over the years, and learned that all of them were somewhat divisive. Bridge building, people thought we were literally building bridges. Community cohesion, various phrases. And what we came back to is everybody wants, no matter your politics, you want to live in a caring and connected community. And that emphasis on the local, that experience that you have that is somebody who has different lived experience, different viewpoints, but you care about deeply, I think is deeply meaningful to our country and our democracy. It reinforces pluralism, all of these pieces that I think are the anecdote to a lot of what we're seeing. And I think AmeriCorps is, in many ways, the heart of that philosophy. And the people who do a year of service have that lived experience. We've heard from people today. It's formative. It is transformative for their long-term vision of who they can be. And so I think they come out with these skills of building meaningful relationships across lines of difference, valuing that, and then they live with that skill that is, one that we may be losing in our country. And so how we really lean into that, and so it's easy to think about the tangible loss of there's not the person mentoring or, fighting fires or all the things that we, are the first layer impacts. But I think the second layer impacts of our lived American democratic principles is one that I would really think about, because we need examples and programs that reinforce those values and that spread them even more deeply to represent the best of our country.
Thank you, Julie. I love that idea of the second level impact that isn't as visible, but in many ways is even more important. Fagan, what are your thoughts on this question?
I think it's a fascinating question. I'll come at it maybe a slightly different tack. I was, as you were speaking, Jill, I was just kind of reflecting back on my own journey. And I remember years ago, I went and saw the Public Allies team in Milwaukee. We were getting Baltimore Core off the ground, and I figured better go learn from the best, right? If we're going to do this, let's learn from others who've done it, and that way we can bring those lessons back. And to a person, they all said something that has followed me, which is they said, when you go through life, you got to make sure that you're looking at people and you got to see the glass half full, not half empty. You got to see the assets there, not the deficits. And you might miss that the oldest child of 4 who can't do that fellowship or can't do that internship or can't do that paid service experience is doing service when she gets the younger siblings dressed to go to church every Sunday, and doing service when they're helping the kid on the bus get tutored and get some education. They're doing service when they pitch in at their local food bank. And I think it kind of resonates with something that Floor, my colleague on the board, said earlier. Deep down, I think most people are good. And I think deep down, most people have an instinct to serve. And I think it's something that people are going to do no matter what. And I think your question is a good one, Alan, because for me, there's an insight in it that as we think about the next 30 years, I would reflect on it going forward, which is, I think AmeriCorps is terribly important. That's why we're all here. And I think it's the leverage point or the fulcrum for a broader culture of service, right? It's an engine that can help propel service, can help scaffold the experience to make it more formidable, to make it more impact. But it's not the only source of service. It's the scaffolding and the support. And I'm really fond of the quote. I forget who said it, but they tried to bury us, but they forgot we were seeds. Like, let them eliminate AmeriCorps. Let them try. Let them try. Because our desire to serve and our desire to lead and our desire to do the work from the ground up, I think, is so powerful and it's so fundamental to who we are. And I think AmeriCorps has tapped into that. It hasn't replaced it. It's tapped into that. And so, folks will continue to come for AmeriCorps, but it's never going to erase or negate, I think, the service that's in all of us. And I think as the agency looks to the next 30 years, I think it should remember that it's buttressed by a culture of service throughout our communities. And the more it can speak to that and tap into that, it doesn't have to carry it all by itself, right? It's like what we're doing in Maryland. We're setting up a service apparatus. It's not technically AmeriCorps, but you're damn right it's in the movement. If we all do what we can do where we can do it, it makes the service undeniable and unbeatable. And so, yeah, will AmeriCorps have headwinds? Sure, it's subject to our federal political process. There's just a hell of a lot of headwinds there. That's just what's going to happen. But it doesn't mean that it's got to be a setback that's irreversible, because I think the service is so fundamental to all of us that if we just keep that front and center, we're going to be okay.
Thank you, Fagan. Yes. I love that as you were developing Baltimore Core, you went to Public Allies and talked, and I love what you said, that they talked about being optimistic, idealistic, see assets, not deficits. And I think you talk to any AmeriCorps member, and that's how they'll respond, and it really unleashes something in human nature. I think that's so beautiful. Well, and I know that thanks to the leadership of Ann Moore-Connolly and Jennifer Ney and Voices, we're going to do this fight. We're going to be successful again. It's a shame we have to do it. And all of us have to get behind them, by the way. I mean, they work incredibly hard. Everybody in this room, you've been here all day. Please make sure you connect with Ann Moore, Jennifer. All of us have connections to tell these stories. Now I want to pivot to the future, and you've all talked about the next 30 years. So given what's going on in the country today, the pandemic and learning loss, the challenge of climate change, the divisions in our country. We need AmeriCorps and service at scale more than ever before, even from 30 years later. I've had the chance to work on this plan with John Bridgeland and More Perfect and all these service organizations, and we set 2 big ambitious goals, and I would love to hear all the talk of scale. Let's get to 250,000 AmeriCorps members, as was authorized in the very bipartisan Kennedy Serve America law that hasn't been funded. And then ultimately, let's get to 1 million people, so that it really is a common expectation and experience. So as we celebrate the 30 years, but look 30 years in the future, how do we strengthen and scale AmeriCorps to achieve this vision that we all have experienced so powerfully today? And what do we need to do to take the program to the next level and ensure its growth and success? Kyra, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think, from the scaling perspective, I think, and this won't be surprising for folks given where I sit, but I think that there's a real importance for state investment and state policy change as well. I certainly think that there's federal investment that is needed for that, absolutely, but if we're talking about getting to 1 million, the idea of there being enough federal funding for 1 million AmeriCorps members is a little bit hard for me to fathom, to be honest with you.
Right.
But I do think we can get there with state investment. And so we've been seeing a number of states around the country that are investing in core type programs. We've talked about obviously Maryland and California and what we're expecting to see in Utah perhaps soon. And I think, again, that's where it's going to be, because the state investment is going to be important to make sure that the programming really is focused on the needs of that state. And there will be funding mechanisms, because that's the priority of the governor and the legislature as well. So I think that's really, really important. I think also on the policy front at the state level, again, AmeriCorps has a good structure. Again, we are revising it, we're revamping it in ways to really help it for the next 30 years. But I think that there are things that can happen at the state level to help with that as well. And so things such as removing the income tax on the education award at the state level, we've seen that happen in 5 states across the country already. I think there's opportunity to do that at the federal level, but I think also the state level as well. We're thinking about things like in-state tuition and all these things, again, things that are going to incentivize people to think about a year of service, maybe a couple years of service. I think those are things that we can see happen at the state level, and that may be easier in some aspects than trying to do some of these things at the federal level, in all honesty. The other thing I think that's going to be really important as we're thinking about scaling is really investing again in members and the member experience. And I think we've seen that over the last several years, which has been really, really important. But I think we really have to be able to talk to the next generation of members about why a year of service is going to be valuable to them. And I think increasingly that's going to be around this idea of service to workforce pathways as well. So really, like, this year of service is going to lead you into a career path, whether that be in public health, whether that be in education, whether that be in a climate-related job. And so again, I think us being really thoughtful about that is also going to increase interest, but then also I think increase funding. And so for example, in Colorado, we see that they're really thinking about developing this service to workforce pathway. They have developed a registered apprenticeship program, which is a way to, again, to get people into public health careers in the state of Colorado. I think that's a model that can be replicated across the country, and I know many of our commissions are starting to think about that as well. Again, how are we aligning the workforce needs of the state with service opportunities? And so I think that also is going to be an important piece as we think about scaling.
That's fantastic, Kyra, and you're right. And the thing is, governors are starting to do that. Governor Newsom, $189 million out of his budget. I know in your first year that Governor Moore has invested real money from the state to supplement what AmeriCorps is doing. So I think that's a great insight. Julie, what's your view? What do we think about for the next 30 years? How do we really take AmeriCorps, this idea of service to scale, and really embed it in our life?
I think it's a yes and. I've heard a lot of great ideas today, and we're probably going to need all of them. One of the things I've been thinking about is the larger kind of service movement and the context in which we support AmeriCorps. And recognizing, if we look at the numbers, just volunteerism as separate from national service is down post-COVID and hasn't recovered. And I think that changes the dynamic in which AmeriCorps asks and really fights for growth. And so how are we building back this culture of everyone volunteering on a regular basis and that being part of our society? We have 1.6 million employees in the US. How are we encouraging them to get involved in service? We have hundreds of millions of customers. How are we making it easy for them to give back? And then I think as people do that, they meet AmeriCorps volunteers. in their service. They understand the problems of their community differently, and AmeriCorps starts feeling like a really logical thing to support. They don't have to learn about it from a policymaker who, let's be honest, is not often very popular. They can learn about it from, oh, that is the person down the street, that's Jennifer, that's Elise, that's, and that becomes much more tangible. And the more people we have out in communities volunteering and giving back to their community, the more they'll be like, oh yeah, of course I support volunteerism. That's so-and-so, and what I care about couldn't be making the impact it's making if they weren't there. And so I think we need to both defend and build and invest and grow AmeriCorps, but do that in a context of building on-ramps, building supportive networks, and really making sure that we have a culture of volunteerism in our country.
Thank you, Julie. I think that's so on target. I should have mentioned that, thanks to Points of Light's leadership, the other big goal we have in our plan is to get to 100 million volunteers. And President Clinton referenced this morning. On average, every AmeriCorps member actually leverages 25 other volunteers. I mean, Habitat's an amazing example of this, for example. I think they do 50 or 60. So there is, as Harris used to say, that is another twin engine. Fagan, to wrap us up, what's your vision for the next 30 years, and how do we get this idea to scale and change our country?
I was sitting here, I was like, plus one amen, plus one amen. So I'm tempted to leave it at that. So I'll just double click on a little bit of what my colleagues have shared here, what I found particularly resonant and important in this. And namely, we need more stakeholders in the game. It cannot just be the federal apparatus driving this. And we need states to step up, we need private companies to step up, we need communities, we need cities. Big part of the Baltimore Core model is city investment. From the city of Baltimore spends millions of dollars a year in a service corps. That has got to be table stakes for us going forward, and we've got to think about AmeriCorps in the broader service movement, and it's kind of pulling the movement along and propelling the movement, but it's not only the movement, right? We need more stakeholders in the game. And then second, I think to win the scale war, which is something I think we've been on from day one, you got to win it here first. We got to scale in people's imaginations before we can scale in the budgets. And just a few observations, particularly now as a board member at AmeriCorps, we don't give AmeriCorps the respect or the due that I think it deserves, and it's the small things and the big things. There's a lot of AmeriCorps alums, if they're given their Academy Award acceptance speech, don't mention that they're an AmeriCorps alum, right, unless prompted. Those little things matter. I know that we're really mindful of that in Maryland as we're building the cool, new, fun thing, and our state commission is part of our operation, and we're learning from AmeriCorps, and we're co-investing the dollars. We're doing this in partnership. Those things feel small day to day, but it adds up to brand equity in people's consciousness and imagination, and that brand equity really matters, because I think part of the reason we're always on the chopping block is we suffer from, I think, a deficit of support and recognition even after 30 years. And that's on us. Like, I think we can do a better job of uplifting the movement. And then I think the other side of that coin, and I saw it at Lead for America, I had the privilege of serving on their board as chair for several years. And I think it dovetails these 2 points, and hopefully I can make it. AmeriCorps as an apparatus is becoming more flexible, and it's becoming more responsive, and it's becoming more responsive to what people imagine for service for themselves. And so I think service has got to leave this kind of prescriptive notion, this kind of cookie cutter, here's the 2, 3, 4 different ways you serve, and instead understand that young people today, they don't want to be told how they can serve. They want to be trusted to serve, and they want to be empowered and supported to do so, because they truly believe that they're closest to the challenges themselves, and therefore they're the solution. And what they need is the support, and for us, frankly, to get out of the way. And so as we reform the structures to make them more flexible and reactive, and as we build the brand equity and imagination of what's possible, I think the magic is when someone says, yeah, I want to serve, I know exactly how I'm going to serve, I know how to access this resource called AmeriCorps or the service movement, and I'm going to go, to use your aphorism, Alan, I'm going to go be the change, and I'm going to do it myself. I think if you do that, and people can see that play out in their community every single day, there's nothing that's going to stop the movement. And I see that in the young people. They have the answer. They're ready to step up. They want to be entrepreneurial. They want to be creative. They want to kind of create their own future. They want to serve us and lead us there. We've got to trust them to do so, and we got to put them in the driver's seat. If we do that, we're going to be A-okay, no matter what happens.
I love that vision. I love that we have to really imagine it and get people to see it. And I just want to close where I began. First of all, can we thank these extraordinary leaders? I just want to close with a note of gratitude. Bill Buckley wrote a book called Gratitude about National Service, Republican, by the way, which was an inspiration for me and Michael. This has really filled my soul today, and everyone has spoken so beautifully. And I want to thank all of you, because I know that any one of you could be up here on this stage, and you could speak just as articulately and beautifully. And I know we're talking about the next 30 years, but I want to throw out a challenge. 10 years, we come back here for the 40th anniversary, and we actually have scaled AmeriCorps. And we actually don't have arguments about it anymore. And we actually understand that this is who we are, and it's part of our soul. And I think if each one of us in this room commits to that, and then we go get 2 more people and 2 more people and 2 more people, we can achieve that vision. So we need your leadership. Thank you all very, very much.
Please turn your attention to the screen for a message from U.S. Senator from New Mexico, Martin Heinrich.
I grew up exploring the woods and creeks around my family's home in rural Missouri. My mom was not always thrilled with the king snakes and tarantulas, even snapping turtles that I brought home. But she encouraged what would become a career dedicated to protecting America's wildlife and wild places. When I first moved to New Mexico after college, I was drawn to our state's vast and wild outdoor places. And after starting my career in Albuquerque, doing defense research, I felt called to pursue a different path of service. AmeriCorps was still relatively new at that point, and I was intrigued by an AmeriCorps position working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on Mexican gray wolf recovery. Wildlife biologists were preparing to reintroduce these endangered wolves back into their native habitat in the Southwest. But before they could move forward, they needed data to prove that there weren't any lobos still roaming wild in the state. My AmeriCorps colleagues and I went out into the backcountry for 10 days at a time. Surveying huge areas of New Mexico and Arizona, we would stop every mile or so and then howl into the darkness in each cardinal direction. Despite all of our best wolf calls and a few terrible ones, no wolves ever responded. We did hear coyotes and foxes, screech owls and elf owls, and even the threatened Mexican spotted owl, but no wolves. The data that we gathered helped to defend the reintroduction that has led to well over 300 endangered lobos calling New Mexico and Arizona home today. I hold on to my experience as an AmeriCorps member to this day, and I am proud to be the first, but certainly not the last, AmeriCorps alum to serve in the United States Senate. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of meeting many AmeriCorps members working on a wide range of very meaningful projects. As the Vice Chair of the National Service Congressional Caucus, I'm working to grow our support for their national service opportunities. And that includes expanding our support for our existing core network. National service is a critical and cost-effective approach to taking on many challenges. We should recognize how much AmeriCorps members are contributing to communities all across our country. We should also build on the last 30 years with initiatives like President Biden's American Climate Corps. This initiative will provide a whole new generation of Americans with opportunities much like the New Deal's Civilian Conservation Corps. There is so much important work to do to solve climate change and to build our clean energy future. Young Americans are eager to really be the heroes in this story. They can restore our lands and our waters, they can install and maintain clean energy infrastructure, and build healthier and more resilient communities. We need to invest in providing them the training and the opportunities they need to pursue emerging career fields at the center of building climate solutions. I would like to personally thank President Clinton for the opportunity that he provided me and so many Americans 30 years ago. And I am honored to join all of you in celebrating AmeriCorps' success over the last 3 decades. Nothing is more rewarding than serving others. And I hope we will build on these last 30 years by empowering the next generation of Americans to serve.